In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful, praise to be Allah, praise last messengers and his disciples and followers, firmly and we the people of Afghanistan, relying on his divine will and adhering to the holy religion of miseries and innumerable disasters which have befallen our country, historical struggles, admiring the supreme position of the martyr of the country's of Afghanistan, that a united nations charter, as well as the universal order to strengthen national unity, safeguard order based on the national sovereignty and territorial integrity, civil society void of oppression, strengthen political, social, economic, social justice, protecting a prosperous life and sound living environments for all inhabitants, and eventually regain Afghanistan's appropriate place in the international family. Have herein approved this constitution in accordance with the historical, cultural, and social realities, as well as requirements of time through our elected representatives in the Loya Jirga, dated January 3rd, 2004, held in the city of Kabul.
This is the current constitution of Afghanistan. What reads in Article 44 goes as the following. The state shall devise and implement effective programs to create and foster balanced education for women, improve education of nomads, as well as eliminate illiteracy in the country. Yet now in the new year of 2025, women are unable to receive any more than a secondary school education. Women are unable to attend and teach at universities. Women haven't been in school in 1,000 days. 1.4 million girls banned from school. And as more and more reach 6th grade, that number will increase.
The customary laws of Afghanistan highlight crimes against women. A few examples are provided of crimes and laws involving them. If a woman does not struggle against or otherwise resist a man who assaults her, she is deemed to be a willing participant and both she and the perpetrator will be killed. When a woman marries or goes to her husband's house, she becomes his namos. If her husband beats her, breaks a bone, injures a body part, or kills her, her father may claim puar. If the father does not consent to the puar, he can perform qisas and kill her murderer. The term namos is used to refer to a woman as a man's pride, property, and responsibility. This raises the peculiar question of, rather than being adult human females, the women of Afghanistan's treatment are more akin to someone's belonging without a warranty, not as a person, but as an object.
دا نکاح هم دا د خدای تعالی نظام دی په دا بندګانو کې نکاح خو ښه کار دی ښه بیبي شافیه څه وایي
میراث خور دي مراسته دي ناستي ما من اجوري دا د پورونه ومنه د ډاکټر تر راسل وجه تجي دلات
The laws have impacted their culture and formed a newly found idea when it pertains to marriage. Kids and teens are getting married younger than depicted. In fact, evidence from WHO suggests 15% of Afghan women aged 15 to 49 years were married before the age of 15 and 46% before the age of 18. Out of all the women aged 15 to 49 years, 92% believe that a husband is justified in beating his wife. The terms of Afghan laws have manipulated ideals that are normally frowned upon and with how they built up standards of disregarding their wellness. The violence and repercussions of not following tradition leads to an area of control and trying to fight for their lives but are trapped in.
According to a 2022 International Labor Organization report, Afghanistan's female labor force participation rate was 19% in 2020, which was 4 times less than the male participation rate at 81%. Eventually, the female participation rate decreased to 16.7%. To this day, there are no changes on the Taliban ban on women's participation in work and education, and this has caused severe economic consequences for Afghanistan. This negatively affects the role of women in Afghanistan in their society, increases poverty, and prevents economic growth.
There was a time before when women used to work, when the capital of the country used to thrive. Tourists entering in and out, and skirts and dresses allowed to exceed the needs. What is known as the golden era of Kabul in the 20-year span through the 1960s to 1970s. So, what happened?
It's the year 1978, and the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, known as the PDPA, seized power in the country. National Geographic nobly quotes this decision as a series of events that would turn the poor, mostly peaceful country into a breeding ground for terrorism. In later years, the Afghan civil war would break out.
Assistance would be given from the United States, Pakistan, Iran, and China for those rebelling against the PDPA. Not only were these countries fighting against the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, but Russia, formerly known as the Soviet Union, who was in favor of them. After a long fight, the PDPA fell down in 1992. By 2001, the Taliban came against the U.S. with al-Qaeda in a terrorist attack today known as 9/11. The U.S. military fought from this and entered Afghanistan to eradicate the Taliban's dangers. This was achieved by December of that year.
In 2004, Afghanistan had their current constitution in place. With hopes to rebuild the country, Afghanistan adopted democratic practices, having presidents and vice presidents elected every 5 years. But there was one problem with their plan. As the Taliban tried to regain control, the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan officially lacked authority outside the capital. One big decision would lead to changing the fate of its citizens and the whole state of the country.
2020, February 29th. Zalmay Khalid and the Taliban signed an agreement for bringing peace to Afghanistan, which marked the withdrawal of American troops. During the presidency of Donald Trump, the military was supposed to be moved by May 2021. Later, it was moved to August 31st of that year when Joe Biden was in office. Quicker than the military fled, the Taliban had officially taken over, including Kabul. Ashraf Ghani led the country as the government and the dreams of reviving Afghanistan the days before the heavy amounts of corruption collapsed. The Taliban would claim victory. Throughout the course of 3 years, an investigation took place about the Afghanistan withdrawal led by Chairman McCall. The Foreign Affairs Committee Republicans quote that the Biden-Harris administration was determined to withdraw from Afghanistan, with or without the Doha Agreement, and no matter the cost. Accordingly, they ignored the conditions in the Doha Agreement, pleas of the Afghan government, and objections by our NATO allies, deciding to unilaterally withdraw from the country.
In the times where the Taliban was coming into power, war was in an uprising and depleted their economy. From 1997, their GDP started at $3.7 billion, and just within the short 23 years, it dropped to $2.7 billion, and continuously fluctuates until the demise of the Taliban.
Women were denied access to jobs and access to the labor market during this time, and when the Afghan government came into power, the proportion of women in the labor market faltered to a very great degree. According to the Ministry of Economy and the World Bank, Afghanistan currently has the lowest FLFP rates in the world, at around 16%. Afghanistan is also ranked 171 out of 188 countries as the most difficult and dangerous country for women by the United Nations Gender Inequality Index.
The transit trade, mainly the smuggling of duty-free goods into Pakistan, made up half of Afghanistan's gross domestic income, which was approximately $5 billion. The thrust data was unavailable and Afghanistan was a fragile state.
By having women's rights and responsibilities limited, not only are Afghani girls suffering, but the country as a whole because of its own policies. All citizens are facing one of the worst humanitarian crimes to take place present day. Majority of them deal with poverty exacerbated by economic disparity. With the troops of the U.S. being removed and the influx of violence directed towards gender, Afghanistan can be compared to a ticking time bomb.
The best way to summarize this comes from the book Development, Women, and War Feminist Perspectives by Halia Asfar and Deborah Aid. As Leslie Abilda shows in her essay, changing the gender nature of hierarchy is never easy and at times may appear virtually impossible. There is still a tendency for international powers to choose and appoint all-male transitional governments, which inevitably are poorly qualified to represent women's interests in the nation-building process. The democratization process has to be properly thought through over the long term with appropriate levels and types of investment and the comprehensive inclusion of women throughout. Thus, change is needed not only within the countries experiencing conflict, but also within the international agencies and their working methods.